Echoes of the Veil, Episode 4, Broken, Not Defeated. A new dawn bled slow across the Veil, drowning the forest in gray and blue. Echo and Lira lingered at the edge of the clearing, bodies battered by time, spirit quietly hungry. The moment with the mirror haunted them. Echo felt a weight in his hand beneath the spiral mark, as if the veil itself had coiled anew inside him, an unseen thread pulled tighter. They stepped into the new path. It was not a trail made for travelers. Branches formed tangled cages overhead. The ground was a maze of mud, root, and the remnants of something lost. The mist here was thicker, flecked with motes of silver, and every movement sent ripples through its surface, distorting the sun into shards. The veil seemed awake, alive in more ways than ever. Echo noticed shapes shifting at the corners of his vision, whispering promises or threats. Lira felt it too. She moved slower, eyes always searching, knife ready, but less certain. Birds did not sing, and no beasts dared cross their way. Even the air felt heavy, scented with forgotten fires, the metallic tang of blood, lingering, echoing old battles long consumed by the fog. Every step was ritual. Echo found himself replaying memories, not just of surviving, but of who he might become if he survived again. He felt pulled, sometimes toward Lira, sometimes away, sometimes into the cold emptiness of the mist. After hours, hunger gnawed deeper. Their rations were nearly gone. Lira scraped moss from stones, and Echo attempted to fish in a stagnant stream, his palm throbbing with the spiral's faint cold. No powers came, no answers, just frustration and fatigue. They camped beneath a fallen tree whose roots clawed up, forming a bitter shelter. Echo watched Lira prepare traps, smaller now, crafted from string, bone, and hope. He aided her, searching for hidden things in the soil. Once, his hand brushed something glassy and cool, a tiny shard like the mirror, buried, pulsing faintly. He pocketed it, uncertain. Night arrived thick and relentless. Echo and Lira ate a handful of berries, mouths raw from bitterness. Lira told a story, voice hoarse, a tale not of victory, but endurance, of a survivor who found meaning only after losing everything. Echo listened in silence, catching his breath in the pauses. He stared into the dark, searching for ghosts, for answers. The spiral mark sometimes twitched when he pressed it, but nothing came. No light, no voice. Only patience rewarded him. Sleep was broken by half-dreams, visions of the mirror, the hooded figure, and endless rows of silent watchers. Echo awoke, sweating, body aching. Lira offered water, without words. At dawn, the mist thinned a little, revealing ruins deeper in the wood, pillars carved with unfamiliar symbols, twisted by weather and neglect. Echo and Lira explored, wary. The spiral did not react, but something in the air made Echo's skin crawl. They followed strange markings along the stone, leading to a hidden passage. Echo hesitated, but Lira pushed ahead, determined. Inside, the passage was cold and laced with scents of rot and secrets. Scratches lined the walls, signs of struggle, hopes written and erased 1,000 times. As they moved forward, Echo's mind wandered. He saw, in flashes, the faces of the crows wheeling overhead, the faceless observers at the edge of memory, and for a moment the shadow of himself reflected in that shattered mirror. He wondered what the veil wanted, and what price would need to be paid for the smallest spark of power. Lira paused, touching the wall. The sound that answered her was not quite an echo, not quite a voice, only a warning. They pressed deeper, slower, knowing the veil as both maze and judge. By nightfall, their supplies were gone, their bodies exhausted, but something in the path behind them felt closed, removed from the world, sealed off by the veil itself. Only the harsh promise of the narrow road ahead remained. Echo looked to Lira, a question in his eyes that neither could voice. What did it mean to be chosen in a world that offered no mercy, no gifts, and only the certainty that everything would change, and not always for the better?
The passage narrowed, closing in so tightly that Echo and Lira were forced to move single file through darkness so thick it clung to their skin. The air was heavy with old rot, the taste of mildew and regret. Each footstep echoed in hollow stone, sometimes answered by slow, deliberate drips of water, sometimes by nothing at all, a silence that made every sound their own. As they advanced, their eyes adjusted to the gloom. Here the walls became stranger, etched not just with language, but with haunting scenes, processions of hooded figures, spirals blooming in each palm, forests devouring towns. Some images were chipped away purposefully, as if to erase a truth too dangerous for any survivor to remember. Lira ran her fingers along one panel. These stories, they're warnings more than histories. The veil punishes those who look for shortcuts or seek to take what must be earned. Echo felt the chill of that lesson. He lingered by a carved spiral, its grooves deeper than the others. In its center, a small depression seemed to pulse with cold. His own mark tingled as if an answer, but again, nothing unlocked, no secret path revealed. They pressed on, breathing shallowly. Their path descended and twisted until the world above was gone, replaced by the oppressive closeness of those who failed before them. A rumble shook the stone underfoot. Dust fell from the ceiling, blinding them for moments as they clung to rough walls. Echo heard a distant grinding, the sound of a hidden door or unseen mechanism, triggered by their presence or simply by time itself. When the dust cleared, new carvings caught the remnants of their fire's glow. Desperate shapes, hands raised not in power, but in surrender. Beneath them, shadows were embedded in the wall, locked in dance or struggle impossible to tell which. Lira paused, whispering, "We're not alone." From the tunnel ahead, a low, shuffling sound approached. For a heartbeat, Echo caught the scent of old sweat, blood, and fear, recognition deep in his bones. The mist filtered into the tunnel behind them, thick and deliberate. Shapes fumbled in the dark, pale hands gripping stone, faces gaunt and unreadable. They came slowly, as if drawn not by sound, but by memory itself. Lira lifted her blade. Echo tried to summon any shred of power or warning from the spiral, but all he felt was its cold indifference. As the first of the figures entered the flickering light, Echo realized they wore no masks, just haunted eyes, mouths stitched shut, bodies thin but unbroken. They stopped several paces away, watching, waiting. Lira called out in a dry whisper, "What do you want from us?" The lead figure, barely more than a girl, held up a palm, spiral carved deep, old blood in its grooves. She pressed her hand to the wall and, with effort, traced a new path, a spiral slowly unfurling and glowing faintly in blue. As she finished, all the figures in the passage bowed their heads simultaneously. Silence rolled over the stone. Then, as suddenly as they emerged, they faded back into the mist, their message writ into the wall. Lira and Echo stared at the new spiral. In its center, a single arrow pointed downward, deeper. "It's an invitation," Echo whispered, uncertain if the word was right. Lira nodded, voice hard, "Or a test." They pressed on, battered but determined, the spiral mark colder than ever, its promise both a curse and a key. The future unyielding and shaped by the hands of those who dared carve new spirals from the dark. Following the spiral's arrow,
Echo and Lira ventured downward into the bowels of the passage, far removed from the faint promises of light or surface air. Each step creaked, vibrating through their bones. The path narrowed to a mere crack, walls damp and greedy, swallowing all warmth. The darkness thickened, so deep Echo could only sense Lyra's movements by the sound of her breath and the brush of her fingertips against stone. Occasionally, the spiral in Echo's palm would throb faintly, but with no sense of direction, no clue to meaning, only discomfort. Their supplies exhausted, fatigue became a constant companion. The descent forced them toward anxiety, minds wandering to the faces that haunted the previous tunnels, stitched mouths, spiral scars, sorrow carved into flesh. Every echo felt deliberate, heavy with memory and warning. At last, they reached a cavern, a chamber much older than the ruins, ceiling lost to shadow, walls covered with murals of agony and longing. Here, stone benches encircled a pit filled with mist, denser than any above. Its surface undulated as if breathing, with a pale blue light flickering somewhere beneath. Lira hesitated at the pit's edge. "This is where they tested themselves," she murmured, eyes darting over the benches. Upon one, a small pile of objects, rusted tools, bits of cloth, a broken mirror, dried roots, all signs of sacrifices left by those desperate for escape or answers. Echo knelt at the pit and peered in. The mist seemed to call to him, not with words, but with a weight on his chest, a question unspoken. For a moment, his spiral mark burned cold and deep, like a tether. He remembered the arrow and the message left by the figures above, survive or prove worth. Lira joined him, face drawn and wary. They studied the objects, searching for meaning. Lira found a carved bone, etched with a pattern she interpreted as endurance. Echo gripped a broken tool. His mind drifted. If he cast the tool into the pit, would it bring transformation or suffering? He hesitated. Instead, he listened, distant sounds of breathing, of movement, as if the mist itself contained the whispers of thousands. He pressed his spiral to the ground, hoping, praying for clarity. Slowly, faint blue lines began to shimmer along the stones, shaping new spirals, connecting Echo's palm to engravings across the chamber. Little changed, but the air seemed to accept something, their presence, their patience, their suffering. "Is it a blessing?" Echo whispered. Lira answered, voice trembling for the first time. "It's a threshold. Some never cross." A wind swept through the chamber, chilling. Shadows coalesced at the edges, shapes not fully formed, memories waiting for hosts. The mist in the pit rose higher, swirling towards them. Upon its surge, Echo caught fleeting visions, past failures, lost companions, endless roads through the veil. They did not leap or offer blood. Instead, they knelt beside the pit, hands joined in silent misery. Nothing supernatural happened, only the endurance of another hour, another sorrow. When the mist receded, an opening in the wall materialized, a door not there before. Faintly, an inscription burned above it. To endure is to be known. To be known brings new trials. Echo and Lira exchanged tired glances. Lira clutched her carved bone as if it might shield her from what came next. Together, they passed through the door, into the deeper dark. The mark colder, heavier, but no easier to bear.
The tunnel bent again, narrowing, guiding Echo and Lira through a passage so ancient the mist seemed too dense even for memories to escape. Their footfalls became more hurried as the faint blue shimmer in Echo's palms stuttered, flickering with warning. The quiet grew tight, then erupted, a chaos so abrupt it seemed summoned by a wordless curse. It started as vibration in the stones beneath their boots, a staccato welling up through the soles and into their bones, setting Echo's teeth on edge. Shadows bled from the cracks in the walls, spilling into the corridor like ink, coalescing into something not quite beast, not quite spirit. A mass bristling with talons, eyes that multiplied the more you stared, ribbed with armor both bone and black mist. Lira had a heartbeat to react, shouting something guttural as she shoved Echo sideways. The monster's limbs lashed out, fracturing stone, slicing air where his head had been an instant before. Its breath was an abattoir, raw, coppery, spoiled meat and rotted rage. Echo tumbled hard, adrenaline spiking so sharp it made the world slow. Pain flared down his side. He rolled, barely dodging a claw that split the flagstone where he'd landed, stone chips sparking off his cheek. Lira was a blur. She ducked under a swinging limb, thrusting her knife into the soft between armored plates. Black ichor fountained over her hand. The beast roared, the sound a pressure wave, not just through air, but through thought. Echo's ears rang, vision double. He forced himself upright, gasping, blood already slick on his thigh, his own blood, hot and cold at once. "Echo!" Lyra's voice, bright and sharp, the only thing anchoring him to the world. The monster came for him, ignoring pain, every movement fueled by hunger. Echo's every instinct screamed at him to run, but his body was slow, slick and heavy from too many wounds, too little rest. He drew his knife, braced for the next strike, but it hit him first. A talon caught his arm, tore flesh, sent the blade clattering away, useless. A shape, Lira, crashed into the beast's flank, shrieking as she twisted her blade upward. It bit, shallow, barely slowing the creature, but enough to edge it sideways. "Move!" she yelled, shoving Echo down a side alcove blindly. He stumbled, vision swimming. Air tore at his chest, lungs burning with each ragged gulp of mist. The corridor warped around him, no path, just obstacle after obstacle, dead ends and random openings. The noise of the monster grew, scraping, roaring, relentless. Lira bolted beside him, one hand white on his wrist, dragging when his legs failed. The world shrank to the thud of feet, the slap of blood and spit, the animal terror coursing through both. Sight faltered, replaced by sensation, a passage, then a pit, then a fall. They crashed through a rotted door into an offshoot chamber. Here, the mist circled low, shadows flickering against frescoes of fallen gods and beasts in agony. Echo collapsed, one hand pressed to his gut, trying to hold in blood. Lira lost her footing, skidding and slamming her back against the wall to hold herself upright, knife clutched tight but trembling. The monster battered itself against the walls of the passage. The structure was old, softer here. Chunks of ceiling came down, raining dust and chips, briefly blinding the creature and the world. Echo barely registered the cacophony. His own heart threatened to give out. Every pump felt wasted, his senses going syncopated and dull. "Echo, no." Lira dropped to his side and pulled him behind another slab. The monster howled, groping at the entranceway, but the opening was too narrow for its bulk, forcing it to gouge the old walls, its howls becoming cracks of anger and frustration. This gave Lira a reprieve, a thin sliver of time. She pressed her hand to Echo's wound, trying desperately to slow the blood with her shredded tunic, to force him upright, to drag him into deeper shadow. Every movement hurt. Echo's vision flickered in and out. The spiral on his palm was no longer cold, just numb, as if spent beyond recovery. He thought he saw, through the haze, his reflection in the eyes of the tunnel beast, as if both were dying creatures in the sunless underworld, too stubborn to let go. "It's not pursuing," he coughed, voice barely more than wind. "Not yet," she whispered, checking the slit cut in her own arm, narrow but bleeding heavily. They crawled through the back of the chamber, guided by echoes, hope pooled in exhaustion. By luck or sacrifice, they found a crack in the far wall and squeezed through, the stone biting at skin, tearing more cloth, leaving a trail any predator could follow. A final stretch, sprinting, limping, half carrying and half dragging, breath tearing skin from lungs, then stumbled into a hollow beneath fallen masonry. It was dark, cold, possibly lethal if the monster searched well, but for now, silence. They collapsed in a tangle, flesh pressed to stone, blood mingling. The world spun. Outside, the monster paced, roared once more, and then faded, forced to find easier prey. Inside, only pain and the emptiness left by fear, endurance spent. Lyra's voice was barely audible. Don't sleep. Not yet. If you sleep now, you won't wake up. Echo tried to answer. All that left his lips was a ragged gasp.
The world narrowed to this, a fissure beneath fallen masonry. Echo half slumped, blood soaking through his torn shirt. Lyra crouched over him, eyes burning with focus and fear. The distant monster's steps faded, its anger slowly bleeding itself into other darkness. For a few heartbeats, everything felt still, a cruel trick by the veil, more reprieve for dread and hope. Lyra's hands worked quickly, urgently. She tore more strips from her own clothes, pressing them to Echo's wounds, sometimes muttering syllables too garbled to be prayer or curse, the language of survival when words fail. She found a shallow cavity in the crumbling stone, tucked Echo in as best she could, then reshuffled debris and old boards to disguise his presence, a hidden, desperate nest amid the carnage. Echo's breathing was ragged, effort burning through him like rust. He faded in and out, vision blurring to copper and blue. Somewhere, his spiral mark throbbed dully, a reminder that pain and memory could be kin. Lyra checked her own wounds. Arm sliced, thigh bruised, side aching. She bound herself quickly, gritting her teeth, head swimming from pain, exhaustion, and alarm. Her voice, barely above a whisper, settled Echo's mind on the edge of panic. I'll be back. Have to get supplies, medicine, anything. She wiped sweat from her brow. You stay covered. You hear anything? Don't move. If it finds you, she wouldn't speak such ends. Echo tried to respond, but his voice drifted off, only a faint breath echoing in the hollow. Lyra's hand lingered at his shoulder for a moment longer, as if imprinting a promise in his skin. Without ceremony, she slipped from shelter, every muscle protesting, every sense screaming with warning. The mist outside was bone gray, shifting in slow, oily currents. Lyra kept low, using rubble and fallen beams for cover. One misstep would mean death. She moved by memory and instinct through the ruins, every sign of old passage a possible trap. Her knife was slick from past blood, hand cramping from overuse. She cataloged plants growing in cracks, berries pushing through rot, a rare blessing in such devastation. Further out, the world opened. Here were broken pillars surrounded by mud, a thin stream winding past heaps of dead wood. Lyra eyed a patch of familiar green, medicinal roots and stalks she'd seen, gathered, used in times less dire. She knelt, prizing the plants from earth, rinsing them quickly, unsure if she'd have time to use them properly. Her senses pricked, a subtle twitch in the mist, the weight of eyes invisible, a signal she could not ignore. A low growl. A medium-sized monster prowled just beyond the next heap of rubble, misshapen, banded in mud and scabs, face half buried in moss. It sniffed, scratching at decayed stones. Lyra's pulse hammered. She shifted, calculated quickly. She needed those supplies, needed Echo alive. One chance. She circled, shallow breaths covering her steps, then launched herself at the beast before it turned fully. Her knife struck home, shoulder, then jaw, then the soft place beneath the ribs. The monster retaliated, claws slashing, body twisting in pain. Lyra shouted, biting the inside of her cheek, fighting not with skill, but with rage and animal tenacity. The world shrank to a blur of blows, the taste of her own blood mingling with mud and monster. Finally, after a brutal tangle, the beast slumped, dead or dying.
limbs twitching. Lyra wiped blood from her face, gathered what she could: plants, scraps, a handful of raw meat, a few bones for future tools. She limped back through the ruins, adrenaline fading, holding every ounce of will together as the pain and exhaustion tried to shut down her senses. She reached the shelter, finding Echo in that same desperate posture, unmoving, too quiet. She laid the supplies down, checked his wounds again, and only then allowed herself a minute to breathe. Echo's eyelids fluttered at her touch. His voice, thin as paper. You came back." She nodded, tending his wounds, washing, binding, mixing a foul-tasting paste from the roots, and feeding it to him in slow, careful doses. Her arms shook, her own pain barely held at bay. They spoke in broken sentences: survival, the fight, the taste of fear, and the meaning of pain. Lyra recounted her battle quickly. Echo asked about the monster, their odds of making it, the shape of the world beyond their cave. Together, wounded, battered, and desperate, they stared into the hollow, neither sure morning would come.
In the hush that followed bloody efforts and bruised escape, Lira knelt beside Echo, every movement deliberate, jaw clenched against pain. She mixed bitter paste from the roots, tore bandages as thin as breath, hands trembling beneath the weight of their world. Around them, the shelter's shadows pulsed: protection, prison, hope, and a reminder of everything lost to the veil. Echo's eyes flinched open, unfocused but aware. Each breath was an agony, ribs grinding, lips cracked and dry. He watched Lira as if he couldn't trust the shape of her face or the gentle urgency of her voice. "Talk to me," she said, low, whittling each word to its essential meaning. "Stay awake." He tried, voice catching, words stuck behind blood and exhaustion. Did you win?" Lira nodded, half smiling at the absurdity. "If this is what victory feels like, maybe we shouldn't chase it." Echo coughed, a fragile laugh. His hand, slick with blood and paste, clutched hers, grounding the world. For a moment, silence stretched. The only sound was their breathing and the subtle wind worrying at masonry above. "Are we safe?" he asked, uncertain, raw. Lira splayed her fingers over his chest, checking wounds, eyes searching for hope in bruises. "Safe's a word for stories, not for us." For a while they shared pain and ordinary things: the pattern of the blood on Echo's side, the slow heat of Lyra's own wounds, descriptions of the monster, its claws, its stench, its desperate cries as life drained. Conversation was sparse, but honest. Each word burned, a lesson, not comfort. Echo's voice trailed. "Maybe I should have died there. Feels like the veil doesn't want us anywhere but close to the edge." Lyra's answer was grim. "That's what surviving means. We earn another day and spend it struggling. But if you die, I'm alone. And if I'm alone, we're dead, truly." She pressed a wet rag to his forehead. Echo tried to move. His body refused. He saw light behind Lyra's head, fading, thin, the kind that always meant morning came sparingly here. "Do you hate it? This place? This fate? Us?" His question wasn't accusation, just need. Lira blinked hard, emotion leaking through her mask. "Hate's easier than hope, but sometimes I think if I hate it enough, maybe it can't change me. I need something stubborn inside me. I need you for that. If you go, I lose it." Echo squeezed her hand. His spiral burned cold. "All this pain, does it make us better? Or just different?" Lira shrugged. "Pain teaches. Better and worse are just stories people tell after they survive." They drifted into silence, each thinking of monsters lost, chances spent, the weight of wounds and hours. Eventually, Lira stood, chest rattling, prepared the paste, and forced Echo to drink. He gagged but swallowed. Survival always ugly. She finished, her own bandages rough and makeshift, and lay beside him, knife out, every muscle wired for impossible alertness. The night was long. Echo faded in and out. Each time he woke, Lira was there, watching him, talking softly, describing the world as she wanted it to be, not as it was. Morning came dull and gray, thin light trembling through cracks and stone. Lira sat up first, checking the perimeter, redefining safety with every scan. Echo stirred, throat parched, but spirits flickering somewhere between broke and awake. He leaned close. If we survive this, we can survive tomorrow. And maybe, if the veil lets us, we'll find... She didn't finish. Promises were fragile things. Echo closed his eyes, clutching broken fragments of hope. If the veil demanded pain to teach lessons, maybe pain could shape them into something. Not heroes, not victors, but survivors unwilling to forget. The chorus of distant monsters howled beyond the ruins. Today it was a sound that meant they still mattered, if only for another day.